How much is your personal information worth? Have you thought about that? Like, what is the actual numerical value of your personal information? How much money would it cost? This is something most people don't think about, and I thought it's something that we must discuss. I've tried to speak about this before, but the problem which I did before, I tried to jumble up all these articles and information and try and throw them all into one video, making it up just a jumbled up mess. But as I improve now, I realize it's better for me to simply speak on one topic, focus on it, allow people to think on it. We speak about it, have comments, discussions about it, and then we move on to the next issue. Now, this issue is actually a 3-part series that I wrote about, but I'm actually going to start with part 2 and then go to part 1 and part 3. Don't ask me why, it's just the way my mind works. Okay, my name is Lubula Paulo Chkwekwe. I'm an AI engineer with over 5 years experience in data science. Personal information is broken up into something called data. Data is literally information that can be measured. When I speak about broken up into, when you're on, for example, social media or any other aspects, this information is broken up into certain clusters that can be measured. Now, the reason for breaking it up into these clusters is it can be easier to measure, easier to quantify, easier to also give something specific for. What I mean by that is, firstly, for example, your information when you log on to any social media, they'll ask you, for example, what is your name, which area are you in, or which country, what's your age. So we've already broken up that information into location demographics, age demographics, sex demographics, ethnicity demographics. Now, these clusters which are broken up can then be used for something. Like, for example, when you go onto social media, let's just say, for example, Facebook, your information, let's say it's broken up into your behavioral cluster. So what do you like? What do you see that will keep you on the platform longer? When you're on the platform longer, you can be able to then receive more ads. Who do you like? So who are the people that you like? Who are your friends? Who are your family, your network? This is also something that plays a critical role into it, because where are your friends? What demographic do they fall into? Because remember, what I'm trying to actually, I don't know if it's subtle or not, I'm trying to say that everything leads towards ads. Most of your favorite companies, social media companies, most of them, for example, Facebook, I think, was it last year or 2 years ago, recorded over 97% of their revenue coming from ads. So if this company, 90% of their revenue comes from ads, let's just put it this way. How much money are they making from ads? How many people do they have on their platform? Divide the number of users on their platform by the revenue they have, and you have the value of personal information. This is a very oversimplistic idea, but if it's just a way of you thinking that, okay, if this information is broken up into clusters and broken up into systems, and it's broken up for 2 reasons: keep you on the platform for longer so you can get ads, and also have this specific information so when you're selling ads, you can be highly specific. When you sell that information, suddenly these information clusters that have been broken up into specific data can be used to now say, listen, these ads that you're doing, you're not just going to sell to anybody, you're going to sell to your demographic, and your demographic that is interested in these specific things. I think you hear the term targeted ads, but what is the targeting? How are you targeting? This is where something so critical comes in. I hope people are understanding that. As we enter into the world of AI and the use of this information, all this large information can now be used in ways that people didn't even understand. But when you actually think about this idea of personal information, it's okay to give it willingly, but understand the cost and what it actually means for you, what it means for your experience online. So it's not just anymore about ads. It's about changing public narrative, using things like sentiment analysis. So, understanding what people like and analyzing all these things and trying to sway masses to a specific outcome or to a specific target because now this information is readily available. On a closing note, I wrote an article about this story, the value of personal data, on LinkedIn. It's going to pop up there. The link will be in the description. Take a second to read it, try and understand it. It's not that technical, but it will speak about some of the things more in depth of what I've touched on here, so that you understand exactly what's going on, to not only have a better experience, but also to understand exactly what's going on and why. One of the last tips that I'll give is on your internet browser, go to something called cookies and say clear all cookies. It's a simple tip, but just clear all cookies. Some of the things we have to put in your password again, but just clear all cookies. Just say for my sanity. That's all. Not for anybody else. Just my sanity. Just go to your internet browser, find the part where it says cookies, and say clear all cookies. That's it. Can I use your personal information to make a prediction? Can I use your personal information to make predictions of your purchases? Today I'm speaking about predictive analytics. Last week I spoke about the actual value of your personal information, but this week I wanted to take it a step further and speak about how social media companies and just digital companies are using people's personal information to do predictions. So in terms of predicting their purchases and also certain other things as well. My name is Lubula Paulo Chkwekwe. I'm an AI engineer with over 5 years experience in data science. When we speak about predictive analytics, one of the most important things that people need to understand is the culmination of certain ideas, technologies, tools, and softwares have all combined to reach a point where you can have a lot of people's personal information. Social media companies break up people's information into certain clusters. I spoke about this last week, like for example, behavior clusters, like how you behave. Okay, no, not how you behave, like what do you like? Who do you like? What type of information interests you? And they use that information to give you more of what you like, to keep you on the platform longer for advertising purposes. But when we take up that same information, Tata Digital Services came up with a really interesting diagram, an infogram that spoke about a digital twin. So I'm going to put that up in the corner. That digital twin, what they do is they actually now take up all this specific information, location and everything, and they come up with something called like a doppelganger, like a digital twin, digital doppelganger. Then they use that to run and simulate tests on if you're given certain things, how will you respond? And remember, this is also happening in real time. When you're given certain ads, how quickly do you look at things? How a lot of information that you don't actually think about. For example, how quickly you click on this video, how quickly you get off this video, how long do you stay on it, can I keep your attention? There's all these different metrics that can be used, and then you can use this now to start predicting. And I think this is one of the most scary concepts, because people can now take this information and take it to a whole new level. Of course, I've just been speaking about things like market research for advertising purposes, for company purposes, for business purposes. But remember, you can take this and it can then switch, and you can use it to take a whole different undertone. Like, for example, I can say, okay, now let's talk about it on a government perspective. Let's say there's a coming election, and I managed to get a hold of this certain access. So I have a specific area, I can get a specific youth, and I can say, okay, what if I send specific targeted campaigns at this segment? What would their response be? And if their response is this, would this lead me to win an election? This is something which people don't understand, that the way people have willingly given out their information, it can now transform and be taken to a whole new level. Which companies are doing it, why they're doing it, that's a different story. So this is what I mean in terms of all the information that's there, to not just understand the value of this information for social media companies, for these big brands, and how they use that to be a part of their revenue in terms of ads. But now if we take this to a whole new level to say, okay, what can be done with this information? Let's just say ads are just basic level, market research is basic level, but now we start saying, okay, let's take it to a whole new level of how can we predict. Other companies use it for, just say, churn analysis or predicting churn. What they mean is predicting churn is which customers are going to cancel and what issues are customers canceling for. So if you're then able to see that what are the pain points and the issues that people are beginning to actually go on a service, let's say Netflix, and what are they actually watching? How are they watching this information? What are they seeing? Which specific things are they having issues with, or are they enjoying the most? And then when they cancel, then when you now start to see that, okay, this is the things that they can cancel, then you can now say, okay, now that we have this result and then we know what we can predict too, what issues can we begin to implement to change the result of people canceling? And I don't want to get too confusing. Let's say you get a machine learning model to predict something, and then you have the actual answer. Now, when you have the actual answer, your aim is to say, okay, the prediction is this wrong, and this is the actual answer. How can I reduce the difference to make it like this, right? Now, taking that very same concept to say, okay, we have people's personal information and we're predicting this, and this is how they actually responded. So let's train this model to say, this is the difference between what you guessed and this is how the public responded. Now that we're a bit closer to now how you do it, let's now test on a new framework to get a new result. And then we can then be able to get closer to what the public will do. It might seem like it's something far off, but the better information you have, which you've given willingly, the more occurrences, the more specific the information, the more we can get to. So this one, I did a LinkedIn article, which is part 1, which is Predictive Analytics. The link will be in the description. You can be able to read that and understand some of these concepts, where I've come from and what it's all about. But you must understand what you're willingly using giving your information to, what it actually means for you, what it can be used to do to you, and also your community. Because a lack of knowledge is the reason why our people perish. I think that's a beautiful closing point for me. Who wants your personal information? This is part 3 of my series of data privacy. In my previous episode, I spoke about how much your data is worth, and then I spoke about predictive analysis, so using your data or personal information to predict your purchases and also for other nefarious needs. In this last episode on this 3-part series, I wanted to actually speak about who is interested in your personal information. Who are the parties who are dying to know your personal information? My name is Lubula Paulo Chikwakwe. I am an AI engineer with over 5 years experience in data science. When you actually think about it, the idea of personal information being a wanted commodity is quite interesting. But what I'm trying to say is, when it comes to your personal information, it's broken up into levels. We've got the basic level, which is something which the problem is many people don't even know about this. But on a basic level, we've got your personal information, which is used for ads. And that brings up something which is to keep you on like a social media platform for longer, so that you can be able to get more ads. This is a revenue model. There's things like market research, which it brings an aspect of churn analysis. So that's predicting how your many customers will leave a platform or leave a product. Like how many people are going to leave Netflix. This is what comes in at the basic level, right? On the second level, this is what the second episode or part which I speak about, which is predictive analytics. So using people's personal information to begin to predict. Now, many people do sinister things, but also you can then be the idea of a digital twin. This is where the data, I think it's Tata Digital Services came up with a nice document. I'll still put it there so that you can see that on a quick snippet, right? Now, on this episode, what I wanted to focus on was who is actually interested in your personal information. I think we can't just leave that unsaid. I've slightly hinted on it in the previous episodes, but I wanted to now speak specifically on that. I did a LinkedIn article about this, right? So who is actually interested in your personal information? I forgot the title. It's like somebody else wrote it, not me, but it should be on the right hand, I think this side of the screen, and then you can be able to see that. I'll put the link in the description so that you can check that out as well. Who is actually interested in your personal information? I've touched on the slight reasons why, and also the value and what they can do with it, but the who is really important. When you think about it, there are people called data brokers. Data brokers actually collect people's personal information and they sell them to specific people. Some social media platforms are literally also data brokers in some sense, because, for example, they use your personal information for advertising purposes. So companies come and say, we want to advertise, and then they use that information to advertise specific targeted marketing. But how can you target if you don't know the metrics that you're interested in? Now, there's specialized companies which actually sell in between businesses. So your personal information is actually being passed around. It passed around in a really bad way. There's the dark undertone web where you find people's credit card details are being passed around. People's personal information, of course. I think in the past, people would receive sales calls. There are things like, for example, here in South Africa, there's the POPI Act, which is trying to protect people's personal information, but it doesn't really understand the true scope of what people can do. And now when you add large language models, it goes to a whole different plane or level. I spoke about Cambridge Analytica. I'm not going to go too deeply into that, but what it is a scandal of a company which was using personal information and doing a political campaign. I think that's just the best way to talk about it and leave it. I don't want to deep dive into that. But that topic brings up something of the introduction of governments. Now, things like political mining. I'm not sure if you've heard the term or if it's something that's a bit far, but remember personal information when you add politics into it, where you add government surveillance. Now, this is where everything begins to take a really dark turn. So it can become a government surveillance using this personal information that's either readily available or accessible if you know where to find it. This is where you find that now that, for example, the data brokers, remember, what I want is for people to understand exactly where all of this is coming from and why when we say keep your data private, understand data privacy. In my previous episode, I said we die for a lack of knowledge, but I think now we're being used for a lack of knowledge. I think that's a good point for me to end. Thank you so much for watching. I know this last 3 episodes and this series has been a bit of a dark turn. Try and lighten it up and speak on something better. Thank you so much.